You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Good morning and welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on WOOP FM.
Ron's voice has worked all morning until just that moment.
It quit right then.
Good morning, everyone.
99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.woopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553 with a little tickle in my throat. Good morning, everybody. Football scores from last night. Bradley beat the Maryville Heritage. They don't like to be called that. They just like to be called Heritage. But they beat them 27-6. Walker Valley lost to Knox Catholic 62-48, I believe was the final score. Sounds like a basketball score. Yeah. Cleveland was not playing last night. In a big matchup down in South Pittsburgh, two undefeateds, Whitwell and South Pittsburgh. South Pittsburgh won that one 21-14. Going on, I'd like to thank the kids and the staff of Applebee's this morning from the Lake Forest wrestling team. They had their pancake breakfast this morning.
Those guys were doing a great job waiting on the tables.
Now, there was 20 people asked if I needed anything else. So they were really working hard. We appreciate those guys, those young wrestlers who eventually joined the Bradley Bears wrestling team.
It's getting close to season, Brian. Can you tell that's what he's talking about, wrestling?
Yeah. Wrestling's coming, so...
Good morning, everyone. It is already October the 14th. We have a beautiful, mild day going on outside. We've had some really warm weather, this unusually warm, I think, for the season. Usually by now we've had a light frost, and we haven't gotten anywhere close. We got pretty close to a sunburn a few days this week. We had 3 inches of rain one day, and...
something before we forget it. That cough drop helped.
You're welcome. That's why you keep me around. I carry the cough drops.
Not this Sunday, but the next Sunday.
The 22nd.
You'll be at the History
Branch.
Tell them what you're going to be doing.
I was invited by Margot Steele down at the History Branch to come do a book signing down there for my new book that we picked up this week in a whole bunch of big, heavy boxes. And we'll be there at 2 o'clock on Sunday, October the 22nd. I'm going to do about a 20-minute presentation and show people some places in Bradley County that I am 100% sure were Cherokee properties, and talk about how the property evaluations come about. You're just most welcome to come to that presentation. And then if you're interested, we'll be selling the books. It's a 2-volume set for $40. It's a reference book. It's not a romantic read. It's a reference book.
But it's pretty interesting. If you live somewhere near Candy's Creek, you might find out what Indian
at least lived in the neighborhood.
Lived in your neighborhood, and not every piece of property is going to have an evaluation, because a lot of times the property was just area.
There's probably only, I'd say, 125 property evaluations for all of Bradley County. So,
but they were big pieces of property a lot of times.
Sometimes they were, and sometimes they were just a campsite. But anyway, it's been an interesting week. We've had a good time. Like I say, it's October the 14th. We have Brian Reed here with us today, and we're talking about an activity that has become, what year is this, Brian?
This is the 11th.
The 11th year of the Fort Hill Cemetery Tour. And the first couple of years they did it, they had nice little crowds. And I think last year we had several hundred people, maybe 500 people or so.
Yeah.
And it's becoming a must-do thing on a lot of people's lists, especially the historians. And this year we're kind of shifting away there for 4 or 5 years. 5 years during the celebration of the sesquicentennial for the Civil War. We did Civil War folks, and now we've moved to World War I, since this is the 100th anniversary of World War I. And how did you? Let's explain first what the cemetery tour is, Brian. Well, who came up with that idea anyway?
I think it actually originated out of John Coates, who's the professor of history at Lee. Mm-hmm. It was something that one of the historical societies that he was working with, where he is originally from, was doing, and he had suggested it. And since then, we've been using it as a way of raising money for Dr. Snell, who was professor of history at Lee.
Mm-hmm. Everybody remembers Dr. Snell.
We have a scholarship fund that we raise money through Lee for that fund. But also we use monies for recurring costs. And we're going to be having many costs this year with the fact that moving into a different generation, we're having new costumes. They're ordered. We're going to need a nurse's uniform.
Which reminds me to say, if during the bicentennial you had a dress made or a suit made that's hanging in the back of the closet that no one's using, this would be a good organization to donate that to. They would get it cleaned, and eventually they would probably use that.
That's right.
And I always like to see the creativity of the costumes. Sometimes they can take something that's brand new and turn it into something that looks the time period. I know I've seen things up into the flapper era in the 1900s, and all the way back to hoop skirts, and and the coats and things are pretty.
We've been fortunate with some of the reenactors we've had help us in the tour. They've brought their own uniforms that they use, and we still have that going forward for this one too. We have someone who has a World War I outfit. They'll be bringing it to wear, but we're ordering others. We're ordering other replica outfits. Mm-hmm. But it's a huge expense, again.
Well, replica outfits are expensive.
Yes.
I've been putting together I'm doing a character called Dr. Lemuel Moore, the medicine man.
Right.
And I'm going to do a medicine show like the old time snake
Snake handling, snake oil.
Snake oil, the snake oil salesman and all that. And when you buy the hat and the coat, and I'm not a regular sized person, I'm a little taller and bigger, so all my stuff costs more.
Right.
So I've got my coat and a vest now, and my hat. Still working on my pants.
Okay.
So, I got a pattern. I have to make those because they don't look like modern day pants. But yeah, get that sewing machine out. Let's see what I can do.
Got to find some galluses.
Yeah. But anyway, that's going to be fun, and the costuming is expensive, and I'd say this year there won't be a lot of excess money to go to but who knows?
Right. But yeah, I was going to say that the tour is inexpensive. I mean,
it certainly is. Yeah. I know that I've seen others advertised that are much more expensive than this. It's just $5 a person. Mm-hmm. Students we sometimes discount even further, but yeah, and there are children that come through, but I would say that most of the time
we don't charge.
They're just kind of playing in the background.
Yeah, we don't charge for students.
I always like the students, like the college students. I'm sure are there for extra credit. Do you offer your students extra?
Definitely, yes.
And they look like they're not really interested, and they're in the back of the line. They show up the last hour of the day. But then by that second or third character, they're up at the front, they're listening, they're watching, because it's really interesting to see these people portray the person that's buried there. What their life was like.
Some of my students also volunteer.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're in need of service hours for Tennessee Promise, for the sort of the college initiative that they have to have 8 hours.
When you go up, you'll just kind of pick a group that you're going to be in, and there'll be someone there. Sometimes they're in costume, and sometimes they're not, and they will take you on the route so you don't get lost. But we're in a new section of the cemetery this year. How did that happen?
Well, as we move forward into the century of the 20th, because we've done people in the 20th century before, but they were some of the earlier residents of Cleveland, and they passed away later in life. But now we're moving into a time where much of their lives are spent in the 20th century.
So it could very well be the grandfather of someone listening right now.
So the, as the, town has continued, the cemetery has gotten larger. So we're much more further south and east of the cemetery this time than we have been before.
So beyond probably what were the original settlers in the Cleveland settlement.
That's correct. That's correct.
And who's one of the people that's highlighted?
Well, another reason why we moved so far south was we were determined to try to get in this first round of World War I recognition to highlight the life of Clarence Richmond. And Clarence Richmond was the highest decorated soldier of Bradley County history.
Do you know what section of town he lived in?
I do not know. No. But he was a Marine.
Oh.
And he even wrote a diary of his time while serving. So again, one of the major sources of his presentation that we'll be doing. But that diary is in our history branch of the.
Is it?
Yes.
Is it? Is the original there or a copy?
I believe it's a copy. It's not the original.
That is now that this goes back to what Ron talks about every week on here. If your family has, and sometimes it's just a farmer that wrote down how many eggs he got a day, but they write down things about. They'll also include things about severe weather and the kids going to school and. They couldn't go to church because just really interesting things. I know down in the down on Dalton Pike there is a typewritten copy of the Hambright store from the 1800s, and it has some of the Cherokees that were removed from here going into that store and buying 2 yards of calico and a shot of whiskey. And I think it's just, but by charging that little bit of merchandise, we know. Maybe when they were still here, or if somebody from outside the area came in and purchased something that where they may have been migrating through. So you can kind of tell a lot from these old diaries and things. So if you have one, you could take it to Margot Steele at the History Branch, and sometimes some of the old scrapbooks too. She'll send over to the archives, the Tennessee Archives, and they'll photograph it, and then you can have the original back, and then you can share it with everybody. So what is his, have you read the diary?
No, but parts of it. But as I was saying that, again, since we've moved into the 20th century so much, that some of the people that may attend the tour this time may even remember Clarence Richmond. Because he passed away in 1981.
Oh, yeah.
So, again, he was a prominent resident of Cleveland at the time, and so he may be, again, someone.
Well, maybe we have some listeners out there who related to him. We'd love to hear them call in and tell their stories. So how many people are you covering this time?
I believe it's 9.
Okay.
We have 9, and one of the individuals we're doing, it's a little bit different with the fact that we will be having the mayor of Cleveland at the time introducing himself and his wife.
And who would that be?
His name was Mayor Mee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so he'll be introducing the tour at the very beginning, but as you're walking the tour, you'll pass by his stone, which will be marked on that day. So again, we thought it would be a little bit different, again, sort of to give a context of what sort of Cleveland was like. And
I think it's great with the period dress, and like I say, it is a walking tour. Let me tell people that is if you're in a wheelchair, this will be a very tough place to go. There, it is. Yeah. The hospital, the cemetery is just not handicap accessible.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that. But
we do our best to stay on the road,
right?
The roads within the cemetery. But again, there's going to be some times that you'll be walking off of the path.
So if you have someone with you that could help you push you down the road, the roads in the cemetery are not the greatest either.
No.
So, but you could probably go and hear what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And but please come by, and it's $5. You don't buy them in advance; you just show up. It's 4 to 7 on that Sunday, the 29th. So we'd love to hear. We're going to tell you all 9 people that we're talking about today. If you're related to them or know stories about them, we'd love to hear them today.
And parking, we should have mentioned that parking is done at the Boys and Girls Club.
Mm-hmm.
We have access to the field there, and it's quite a walk this time. You're welcome, of course, to walk up to where we start the tour, but this time it's going to be a greater distance. So there is a van that will shuttle you up the hill.
I would recommend the shuttle.
Yeah.
Now, I can come back down a lot easier than I could go up.
That's right.
That walk up is a pretty good one.
It is. Yeah.
You know, you're going to go up behind the boys' club on the old, I can't remember what name of that street is, Oak Street? My dad lived on that street, but I can't remember the name of it.
I believe it is Oak Street. Yeah, Oak Street. Yeah.
Yeah, it's he lived right there in one of those little houses there, and watched the Negro baseball leagues play and stuff like that
okay.
as a boy. So, so I think it's very interesting that I was going to say something. I forgot what it was. Now, just go ahead and talk.
Back to you. They lived in the 5th district in 1900. Now I'm looking at the names to see if I recognize any of the people. There's
His parents were Jacob Richmond and Elizabeth Richmond.
yeah, there's actually a picture of them here on Ancestry.com.
Okay.
Welcome. I don't recognize any of these names.
And he had two brothers.
But that's really interesting that to pull it up, and his dad's born in the 1860s, and there's a picture of him here. That's
Do
really
you know if he was in the Marines before they were, or did he join to go?
No, he joined to go.
He joined to go. So,
Yeah, he was enlisted.
so in 19,
And of course, this is the first time we have a draft, selective service.
Is
so
it?
1917, we entered the war. The war had been going on it wasn't a long war, was it?
Not for us, it wasn't.
No, we were there 17 to 18, and it was over.
Right. We entered April 17.
So
really didn't send troops until
17.
that following fall, with that.
So when did it start in York, though? Do you remember?
Yeah, 1914.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's 4 year. It's a 4-year war.
4-year
basically,
war.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the most destructive war of its kind in history.
Of course, that was Sergeant York was made famous from going through there, and
I should say at the time, the most destructive.
Yes.
He lived close to Levi Truitt,
Oh.
so that would mean that he probably lived down in the Waterville community.
Okay.
And so that's interesting. I was just curious where they might have lived.
Yeah. But then we're also, along with soldiers, because there will be several there that will be highlighting veterans of the war, there are also civilians living here in Cleveland that were participating during the war, either through their, there's a Red Cross nurse that we're highlighting.
Right.
Her name was Martha Briscoe Lee, Lea, Lee.
Which is an old Cleveland name.
And the Red Cross got its start in Cleveland during World War I.
Now, had it been other places prior to that, you think?
In the country, yeah.
In the country, but not
in Bradley.
Cleveland.
There was not a Bradley County organization. Yeah.
I know there's a great photograph that we looked at last week at the Historical Society meeting that has soldiers standing on the steps at the depot. You can see the Roth House a little bit in the background, and then there's nurses standing down on the front.
Right, and she's one of the nurses. Yes.
Now, do you know anything what do you know about her?
That's what we're having the students work on. I don't know anything about her other than, again, her married name. We believe that she's connected with Caswell Lee that we've done before in the past.
I believe Caswell Lee lived where C.C. Card's home is now. They tore down the double log cabin to build his present home in the 1950s. I'm a fountain of useless information.
But again, some of this work, we give the names to the students, we suggest some sources for them, and we have them do the digging. We have them again put the foundation.
I know that I've been in the library several times, and they kind of sense that maybe I know something. And they'll come over and kind of share with me what they found, and I'll go, there's a green book over there that you need to look in, and kind of point them because they need to discover on their own.
That's right.
But most of the time, I think that they do an excellent job.
Yeah,
with some guidance, I'm sure.
This is their last project before they graduate. It's they call it a capstone project or course.
Now, do they have to recruit the actors?
Yes, we do.
I mean, do they?
Oh, no, they don't. No,
okay.
No.
I
sometimes
always
they do the acting, and then sometimes we have to find others that fit the part better than others.
I think the best actress we ever had was Jackie. Was it Jackie Westfield?
Westfield, yes.
Oh, she had me in tears.
Yeah.
It was, and she was nearly in tears talking about the slave lady that had become a Dr. Grant, I
Yeah,
believe.
Dr. Grant, yes, sir.
And see, I even remember years later the character's name because of her. But it was just such an emotional thing for her to tell that story.
What I've enjoyed a lot of times is you go in a group 10, 15 at a time, maybe 20, and there'll be somebody sitting there and it says, he'll turn to his grandson and says, that was my grandpa. Steve Gibson was an example of that. And he was
We had to come to a stop and let him explain to his grandchildren who this person was and how they were related to them. And these were older grandsons that were really curious and interested.
So, we've seen that a lot of times. That was a relative of mine. Or so.
And Frances Marion Gibson that they were looking at is also, in a way, a relative of yours, was married to a great aunt of yours, Eliza Moore.
Well, that could happen this time too, because as I was picking the
I think
names,
it may happen more this time.
we selected the Morlock family,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm thinking this is Jeff.
Has to be Jeff Morlock.
Yeah,
I would
Jeff
think.
Morlock.
Jefferson Davis
Yeah,
Morlock.
because one of the there's two brothers, and Jefferson Davis Jr. Morlock is one of the soldiers that we're highlighting.
Oh, I hope Jeff knows that.
Well, Jeff's dad was started with was it William Morlock or something?
I have no idea.
Seemed like it. They lived right there on Central.
Ron can never remember a name, but he'll remember what kind of car they drove.
Well, they drove right. They lived down there on Central near the railroad track. It's where
Yes,
Jeff
they
grew
did.
up. So yeah.
Yeah. But that's really interesting. So the Morlock. So all of these graves are fairly close together, kind of up on the crest of the hill.
Yes.
Over to the east a little bit.
Yes.
In the last couple of days, some folks over on Cleveland and Tennessee History Facebook page have someone started it, and now it continues. The thing in the 50s and the 60s that I remember is that you took one last picture of that coffin with all the flowers on it, and my grandma and my mom both had photo albums full of those funeral pictures. Well, somebody posted a picture, and then it was quite obvious that somebody had lined up all the grandchildren of this person that had died and taken their picture not by the grave, but obviously in Fort Hill Cemetery. But we had a great discussion on there for about 24 hours, I think, of, do you think this is Fort Hill? And, of course, there were no trees up
no
there.
tree line at all.
So you could
whatsoever.
see all the houses, but now when you go to that grave, all the houses are covered with a tree, so sometimes it's a little hard to tell. It's nice when we catch that smoke stack in there every now and then, because you know where you are then.
I want to say you've been involved in getting Fort Hill listed in Find a Grave.
Oh yes, it's all there.
Yeah, I mean
It's all there
that-
now?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, not the images, but every single gravestone that has been, they've all been transcribed. Now, I didn't do the transcribing, but I did put everything online, so you can
So now
search.
who does the daily, weekly updates now?
It's been mostly Anita Green. She's been
Because
doing,
I know when my mother passed away 2 years ago, it wasn't a month till she's on there. My aunt.
yeah, Anita Green's been working on that as well.
That's great.
And, she
And
was the
Anita
one
and
that-
her
it-
some
It was her and her
relatives.
daughter that, and
Minnie
other,
Sue
Minnie
and-
Sue, yeah.
They originally put it on a Facebook page, a website called Cry, something
Yeah.
about the Cry family,
And then they published it into a book.
and didn't reprint.
No, it
They sold immediately. There was like
Yeah.
500,000
Yeah.
copies or something.
Yeah.
Someone in the community, and I don't know if he would want it's somebody that it's somebody out of the Stiver family, I'll say that,
Oh, yeah.
had originally found out that they had done that, and I think gave them the equipment to
Right.
take the picture so you have the GPS
Yes,
coordinates.
Yes.
And they've carried it through. They followed through, and they've made sure that everything's gotten online. And hip hip parade to them.
In
But there
fact,
is an
I'll
image.
tell you the story that Anita, Minnie Sue, and others went through and shot all the graves again with a regular camera, and then
When they got
the donor purchased a new GPS camera, and they shot it all again.
They went back through and shot and it's 5,000 graves or something up there. Bless their hearts is all I can say.
It's actually closer to 10.
Yeah, closer to 10,000. Yeah. And I'm not sure, maybe the WPA records were also added that they didn't have images. I mean, they went beyond that and looked at Social Security records and death certificates.
If you've never used a website called Find a Grave, one word, Find a Grave, and when it comes up, it'll say over on the right-hand side, scan for 160 million grave sites. Click on that. It'll ask you a name, county. If you know the cemetery, next thing you know it, you'll be able to get information about that person. If you join, which basically all you have to do is I sign up, and your grandpa's on there and there's not a picture of him, you can post a picture of your grandfather.
And I am constantly, on about a weekly or every other week basis, updating these items, these graves, not because of the information I'm contributing, but because people are making changes and corrections, or maybe even adding obituary information, and I simply just click a button that says edit, and it brings it all up to date, So other people are contributing as well. And
well, like I say, a lot of the things that I'm sure you did is that you knew the name and where the gravestone is, but you knew nothing else.
And I will tell you that if it wasn't for Anita Green and her project, the Foothill Cemetery tour could not be done. We would never find these graves because there is no other directory that's ever been created.
Hey, folks, you're listening to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here because we're going to open up the phones right now. It's 614-5553. If you got any questions about the tour, or if you got questions about Fort Hill Cemetery, we can probably help you with some of that. And particularly if you're a relative of any of the people that we're going to be on the tour. And read out the 9 names real quick. Can you do that?
Not quickly.
Well, he'll be prepared to do that in a few minutes, Ron.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Well, we're going to open up the phone lines now. You can call us, and we'll tell you those names in a few minutes. I caught him off guard. We'll be talking at the tour. They'll be talking about World War I and how it affected Bradley County, the people who went to war, people who started the Red Cross here in our community. So please give us a call here at 614-5553. Dave, you're supposed to talk after I get through talking.
Okay. I thought it was 11 o'clock.
No, it's 10:30.
I'm lost. I wanted to say congratulations to the History Branch. They opened the doors last week and let everybody tour to see the remodel, and it's absolutely fabulous. It was done the correct way. It was a restore and refurbish kind of thing. And there's something that Margot that works up there is looking for. She would really like to have just one little piece of furniture that may have originally been there at the house. Or another piece. I'm sure, I don't know if she has one or not, but she's mentioned that to me several times, that she's been trying to track down furniture that may be in somebody's attic and not being used, or maybe was donated to the museum or something and she could get it on loan if she just knew about it. So
there's one thing I've been looking for, too, a stack of $100 bills.
That belonged to your grandpa?
Yeah, and if you could go ahead and pass that on to me, I'd
But anyway, I'm serious. She's looking for any kind of furniture that might be in somebody.
They have done a tremendous job in restoring
out of the Craig
Miles
Miles family.
Yeah, so we really do appreciate that over there. And it's a great resource. You cannot check books out from the History Branch, but you can go over and you can make copies. They charge you so much a page.
It's just 25 cents, but I'm sure that's just bare bones there. It probably cost them 25 cents.
If you take your camera or your cell phone.
Or they have a lot of new equipment up there now that you can just put the pages on a scanner and scan it directly to your flash drive, and they charge you absolutely nothing to do that. But in the last few weeks when I've been up there, there have been stacks of community groups, like garden clubs and stuff. There's scrapbooks from the 1920s and 30s that have gone to the Tennessee State Archives and been scanned, and it's absolutely fabulous.
We need that. Anything, before you throw away old pictures or journals or things like that, take it to the History Branch, bring it to Brian Reed, Ron Moore, Paul Hickman.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank Paul Hickman for speaking at the Bradley County Historical and Genealogical Society last Sunday. Good crowd over at the
It was
on a rainy
day, but we
stormy
still had
day.
a nice crowd, and everybody that was there had a good time. And Paul showed some pictures of older buildings that once stood in Bradley County or Cleveland, or probably still there. But it was a nice little discussion.
Still there. They're just something else now.
They're transformed into something else now.
So
I have the family.
okay, here's the people.
The families are the Aiken family, the Richmonds, the Mees, McKenzie, Morlock, Hardwick, and Barnes.
Oh.
Those are the
Very
family
interesting.
names. And then of those families, some of them were highlighting it may be a couple, or it may be a couple of brothers of the family, or it could be maybe a father-son situation, but we're doing, again, a mixture of a couple of grades for some families,
Did Bradley County have any deaths from the war in World War I?
Yes.
Was there
Yes.
a lot?
And I don't know the number. I know that we have a plaque that's downtown at the courthouse that indicates, again, those that passed. Some of those that passed were not wartime casualties, or they weren't casualties involving combat, but involving illness, or again,
If you'll recall, the flu epidemic came through the world at that time.
Yeah.
And I was looking here online a few minutes ago, and there were 50 million people died from the flu worldwide in
Wow.
1918. 16 million people died during World War I. But now the United States got involved there a little bit late, and I know of one instance, a young man named Sam Frazier. He was an area strong man. There's all these pictures of him, flexing his muscles and stuff. He was a big old stout guy. Well, he left here on a ship going to World War I, caught the flu, got pneumonia, and died before he ever got to where he was going. Those are the kind of stories that you hear about related to the flu epidemic in this area. He's buried at Frazier's Chapel Baptist Church that's just over in the edge of Georgia. Also, you have, when you go to cemeteries in this area, you will see almost whole families. The flu came into households and into families, and they just all died.
and one of the soldiers who were highlighting this time died at the very end of the war of influenza at the very end.
And who was that?
His name was Barnes.
Barnes.
Yes.
Barnes.
His first name's leaving me at the moment. It's James Franklin Barnes.
James Franklin Barnes.
World War I is something probably, as a student, we didn't study much about World War I. World War II was more in Korea. We studied
Right.
about that, but my knowledge of World War I is pretty limited. I know Germany was fighting everybody.
Yeah, as I said, it was a short war for America, but it was Wilson's presidency.
Yeah.
And, it was a war that, again, most Americans, in most wars in our cases, were never prepared for. World War I.
Well, and like you were saying earlier, this was the first draft.
It was. It was
And
the
that
first
had to
selective
be
service
kind
pattern.
of different for the folks, too.
Yeah.
And what was that for? James Barnes?
James Franklin Barnes. Yeah, he was on a gun crew of the 375th Regiment.
Now,
Sailor. He was actually a sailor. He wasn't a
okay.
Navy.
I believe, well, I don't know about Samuel Frazier. I started to say I thought he was a Navy too, but I'm not sure about that. So, did we have African Americans from Bradley County that fought World War
very
I?
many. Oh, very many.
Very
Yeah.
many.
Oh, yes.
Hey, that's
Yes.
interesting.
Yes. Now, we had difficulty this time. We were hoping, again, to include African American soldiers as well. We've been, again, over the past few years, again, always including African Americans. And we do intend to do that, again, for our World War I recognition. But this year we're not able to do that.
Because it's just too far away.
Yes, yes. As everyone may know, and maybe you don't know, that Foothill Cemetery is a segregated cemetery. And that portion of the cemetery is on the far north side when we're going to be more towards the
I think
south
that
side.
may be more of a
North side down the hill.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's more of a tradition than it is a requirement. I think that the African American family has, but there's no space to bury
Yeah,
anybody
African
on the old
Americans
part.
were also part of that selective service, and many of them either joined of their own sort of volunteership, but many didn't. And
Well, the,
Yeah,
the troops would have been probably pretty segregated. in
yes,
those
they
days.
were. Yeah,
So-
they had their own regiments. Yes.
So did they actually go to combat, or
Yes,
were they
they
war
did.
support groups?
No, they did both.
Oh,
They
great.
they had their own
It's
combat.
not good that they had to go, but
Yeah, they had their own combat groups as well. They were pioneer infantry regiments. Yes, and
interesting.
again, many of those I've got listed that were African American. One comes to mind. You know, there was a Bayless, Jefferson Bayless. The Bayless family was a prominent name in Braddock County, African American family. But again, there were many.
His death is listed as the Naval Hospital in Philadelphia.
Yes, yes. Barnes died in Philadelphia, and his body was trained or shipped here.
I think that that's one of the things too, is that the things that come and go at the depot during these times, because there would have been probably large groups of young men gathered to get on trains to leave here,
Right.
and the bodies would come home on the train, and so the train station was such an important part of everybody's
That's
life
right.
at that time.
That's right.
I'd say if you have any family members that we met, or if your family, if you have any recollection of anybody in your family who was in World War I, give us a call this morning. We'd love to hear about who they are. The tour does a great job, but it's just a small sampling of what history can provide us. And sometime your grandfather, just the fact he was in World War I, could be a story.
What would will he be wearing a Navy uniform, I guess?
Yes,
yeah,
that's the
of
hope.
course.
Yes, that's
yeah,
the
of
hope.
course.
We do have one.
Well, that was kind of a silly question. James Franklin Barnes, seaman, second class United States Navy, died at the Naval Hospital in Philadelphia, PA, September the 23rd, 1918, caused influenza. Next of kin mother, Sarah E. Barnes, Cleveland, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
That is from the U.S. Navy Casualty Book, 1776 to 1941.
Now, interesting too, we have another veteran who outlived the war. Again, he came home, but his remains are not at Fort Hill. However, his wife is buried there, and on their stone, there's a stone for both of them. It indicates that he is interred in the Gunpowder River Cemetery in Baltimore, Maryland.
I always think that's interesting when you see that,
Yeah.
that somebody will be buried there and it says where their spouse is buried.
Right.
That's very interesting.
But he was a soldier as well during the war, and he also wrote a book. He wrote an autobiography
All right.
that is in the Cleveland History Branch that will be highlighting his life.
What's the name of the book?
I don't recall.
What's his name?
His name was John N. Aiken, Aikaen. But again, he has a very long history of his involvement both in the war and his post-war years that we'll be talking about in the cemetery tour. I hate to give it all away. I got information.
That's okay. We have memory loss. You can tell us today. We won't know
Well,
15
I
minutes.
have information, but I don't want to give the whole
Yeah, but
story away.
Of course, hearing the actors and seeing them in costume is all the difference. We can sit here and talk about it all day,
Right.
but unless you go to it, it's just like saying, hey, I had a good time at that music concert. It ain't the same.
We have had a walkthrough already with the students, and they've done some practicing of their stories. But it's a very robust history because of what he provided with us with the autobiography.
What did he do in his life after the war? What was his business?
If I'm not mistaken, he was like a publisher.
Maybe that's why he was interested in doing a book.
Right, and he wasn't living here. He was living elsewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So she came back here after his death then.
Right.
Old Side Cemetery, Sumter County, Alabama. James Robert?
It's John N.
Never mind.
Okay, yeah, that's someone else.
That's Samuel John.
Yeah.
All right. Never mind.
The one of the interesting facts about World War One, I think, is that at the end of it, America and other groups penalized Germany tremendously and put them into poverty, which I think led to, and many people do too, think that led Adolf Hitler to be able to come in and take over the country so easily, because basically we had just pretty well destroyed it. That 12 years after the war.
Yeah, definitely the economic situation in Germany, was all the result of World War One, and put Germany much more in a sort of a vulnerable state at the time when Hitler, of course, he's appointed during the Great Depression.
Right.
I always tell my students there would never been a Hitler. There'd never been a Hitler coming to power in Germany if there had not been a Great Depression.
Right. Yeah, I think I can't remember all, but Wilson signed a order with 4 or 5 other world leaders that just really punished Germany. Made them pay for war crimes.
Yeah, it's the Treaty of Versailles.
Versailles. Thank you. I knew that. I knew there was some treaty, but I wasn't going to say.
Knows enough to be dangerous.
I'd said Versailles or something. Versailles. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a big thing, and that's so it's funny how this World War One really created what World War II, which is most of us are going to be a little bit more familiar with. And
I think his dad, Mr. Akins, J.N. Akins' dad was Samuel. Does that sound right?
Yeah, Sam J. Yeah.
And Samuel was a lawyer. And I believe he might have been a son of Captain Akins that lived in Charleston.
Oh.
And the others, yeah.
Well, again, John Aiken, he passed away.
information.
He passed away in 1978. Again, someone that
Sure.
people would have known. That if you come to the cemetery tour, that he was, again, a contemporary of our own time.
this is just fascinating to me. I love to go there and hear the kids talk about what they found about them, and I think I would thought that you ought to film all their rehearsals.
Yes.
And then make a DVD, and you could probably make more money off the DVD than you could.
It looks like to me that thing.
I have videoed some in the past, and in this past year, I even did a Facebook Live for those that may not be able to come, or maybe you're from distances away and they want to see, maybe as part of the Bradley County Historical Society, we have people from other states that are members of the society online. They can actually watch the tour from online.
That'd be great. Yeah, it's just one of those things. I thought it was another way to make $1 or $2.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's always thinking ahead.
Well, I think people would buy it, particularly people who had family members.
Sure.
They would love to see that on a long term. And then those people who are handicapped and can't get there, this would be a great way for them to see it and be
I think they
invited.
may have lived when he was a little boy on Highland Avenue by looking at this 1900 census. That's the last street that's listed on here is Highland View Street. So I think that's probably Highland Avenue. Yeah. And he lives kind of around the professionals. There's weavers from the woolen mills and lawyers and seamstresses and dressmakers and house servants and a saloon owner.
Well, some things that should be mentioned
Who
about
was that?
About Hardwick Woolen Mill at the time, realized that with the war, it was converted, from making jeans and clothes.
They were making blue jeans.
But they're
basically.
making uniforms. They actually converted
And
to
blankets.
Right.
And there's still occasionally, I know that when I did the history of Hardwick clothes, and they made a 7-minute video or something. Get the history of Hardwick clothes in 7 minutes. That's kind of hard to do.
We are doing, again, there was a Cicero Hardwick who served in the war, and again, his family was impacted, of course, because of the war and how the factory was being converted to military.
It was converted, and I think they made blankets for the U.S. Army, I believe. I mean, they were making massive amounts of blankets, wool blankets, like, we used to be able to get at the surplus place that, unless the moths eat them, they never go away. But there were wool blankets and I believe some types of uniforms. And I think Hardwick still makes uniforms today on a limited basis. I've seen them hanging over there.
I don't know if they still do it. They did at one time. I don't know if with the new arrangement, they're doing that now or not. But I'm sure they would.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm over here looking everything up that you say today, Brian. I wanted to tell everybody, remind you that today and tomorrow is Prater's Mill. And when you go to Prater's Mill, they will park you in some giant
Cornfield.
If you're handicapped and have a handicap sticker or something, be sure to tell them, because I think they park you a little bit differently then. But you will come over and catch a little shuttle, and free of charge, they'll take you over to the gate and set you out. And when you go inside the front gate, you'll see our friend that grew up in Cleveland, Kathy Lynn Carroll Johannesson, and she sells Native American baskets and gourds and beautiful pine needle baskets. Tell her you heard Ron and Debbie talking about her on the radio, and that'll get her really tickled. But go down there today. I think it's like 9 to 6 today and 9 to 5 tomorrow. About $7 for adults to get in. You can get anything imaginable. Ron and I always like to eat at the Old Country Store across the street because they have real black-eyed peas and beans and greens and all that good stuff.
The real country cooking.
Very country cooking. It smells like fatback when you walk in there, and it's from 100 years of it being baked into the walls, I think. And then next weekend is our big apple festival here in downtown Cleveland. It'll be all around our poor little courthouse that got singed on the inside. And then, of course, on the 22nd at 2 o'clock, we'll be having the book signing at the History Branch. Come and see the remodel done at the History Branch. We can't go upstairs anymore, but we can look around downstairs. And I believe at Christmas they're going to have part of the house open again to the public, and that'd be really fun. Right now, the one of the garden clubs have come in and put beautiful fall decorations out, too. Margot and her staff do a great job up there. And I believe that's all, guys, that I've got written down.
What's the final car show this year?
I would think it's going to be on the 28th of October. And then I guess the block party's going to be on the 31st as usual.
It should be the 31st. That
Yes.
will be Tuesday?
I think so. And then the tour that we're talking about today will be Sunday, October the 29th. Usually starts at 4 o'clock. And us old folks are usually there when they're ready to go. 4 o'clock, and put on your good walking shoes. And if you need a walking stick, take it with you, because you got to kind of look for those. It's an old cemetery, and there's tombstones that you can't see under the leaves every now and then.
And there's groundhogs.
And there's groundhogs. Groundhogs and anthills that you have to look out for. So wear your good sturdy shoes and be prepared to walk a little bit. They'll drive you up to the site and then pick you up and drive you back to your car.
And I would suggest you come with the ability to dress for colder weather, be ready for warm weather.
Right. Have a jacket.
At
you can
4
take off.
o'clock, it could be pretty nice. And at 5 o'clock, which the sun will probably go down at 5 o'clock.
5:30, 6 o'clock, yeah.
The wind comes across that hill. You wish you had on 2 jackets.
Right.
So,
I think probably the funniest thing that happened, and it wasn't funny at the time, but one year it was decided that we'd have a candlelight tour. And no one took into account that they changed the time, and it was pitch black dark up there. But 1 minute the sun was shining, and the next minute you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. But everybody had a good time. I took my own flashlight. I was kind of glad I did. But it's fun, and the kids who are talking don't mind that you take their pictures or do those kinds of things. And every now and then something funny happens. Somebody forgets a line, and they'll say something funny, or, you know, it's kind of nerve-wracking to have those people standing so close.
Well, we come prepared, too. Sometimes we'll have hot chocolate and coffee, and sometimes we have just
Ice water.
cold ice water. You know, so we try to make certain that we have everyone refreshed, regardless.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of good places to sit down. I think the year that I was just getting over being sick, it was kind of tiring for me, and I just find a tombstone and sit down on top of it, you know, to sit there and rest while they were talking, because I just needed to, you know. But anyway, we have a lot of not famous to the world people, but people that really built Cleveland, buried up there at the cemetery.
I call them local heroes, you know, the people who built our factories and our jobs, and who were the lawyers, and those are, we're never we're not going to have that superstar from Cleveland every day. Someday we may have.
My gosh, look what Mr. Hardwick did.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
He came in here with nearly nothing.
He was the largest maker of pants and shirts in the world at one time.
Well, and he started Hardwick Stove Company in his backyard. They started molding the parts for stoves in their backyard.
I'll say too, business related, that one of the people that we're highlighting is, as I said, Christopher Mee, Columbus Mee, and Me family is responsible for the bottling of Coca-Cola.
And thankfully that building's still standing. It's been remodeled nicely.
But he was mayor at the time when World War I began. So
I believe that family lived out in the Chattahoochee Valley in John Sanders' house. That's called the Mee Mansion.
Okay.
And Debbie Moore theory is that house is a lot older than the Mee family, but that's just Debbie's theory. And been beautifully refurbished by the Sanders son that uses it for an office. And when they got really busy in the Coca-Cola business, it was a long way from Chattahoochee Valley to downtown Cleveland in those days. So they moved in the Mead House, which is where the new building is on Lee that you can see across from St. Luke's. I believe it's the second house up on the right is the Mead House. And it's beautiful.
Right.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Folks, you listen to the Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. We got Brian Reed here. We're talking about the Fort Hill Cemetery Walking Tour coming up Sunday, the October 29th, 4 to 7, only $5.
Only $5.
That's the best entertainment you can get for $5.
One year we tried to sell books and things out there, not thinking that people were locking their purses and stuff up in the car. But maybe as the Historical Society, if we ever get anything reprinted, we need to do that down at the Boys and Girls Club where everybody's purses are. I just thought about that because I remember talking to so many people that day at the table that said, I don't have any money on me.
If you
I
have
think
a
we sold all that stuff.
If you have a family member that fought in World War I, give us a call today. We just like to hear their names, and those are veterans. We always like to talk about veterans any chance we get. I know there's a large group went from Bradley County, so some of their relatives have to be out there.
Now, my dad's dad did not go. I have seen his paperwork that he filled out that said, and I saw the same thing on your grandfather, Henry Epperson, where they were farmers and they needed them here to grow food for the war effort and to feed the people in this area. And they were, probably if the war had gone on, they would have gone. But I remember seeing both of them exempt. Thank you. That big word I couldn't think of. Ron, what is it you teach out at Cleveland State?
I teach history. I teach American history and also world history. Do that both online and in the classroom.
So how is it online? That's a different kind of world.
Yeah,
it gets a job done, but you don't get to know the kids.
You don't see their faces. They see mine occasionally, but I don't get to see them. I do hear from them. I talk to them on the phone sometimes. And, of course, we do a lot of communicating either through email or through texting or some other.
How long have you been at Cleveland State?
This is my 21st year, I believe.
Yeah.
Since 1995.
Clicks off fast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 95 when I started teaching part-time there.
And
have
you taught any at Lee?
Yes, I did. I taught there for 5 years part-time from 95 until 2000.
I know Paul Hickman's wife walked in the other day and said, does he teach at Lee? And I said, no, he teaches at Cleveland State. And she said, no, I had him with a class at Lee. And I said, well, you probably did.
That's right.
You probably did.
She was there in 98 when
98, okay.
I posted a picture on Facebook about this program, and I found an old picture from 1915 with a World War era soldier sitting there with 3 of his family.
Huh.
And I have the names on them, but I can't tell you what they are right now. The names on the picture.
Right.
So,
well, that was some of you might recall in the first little bit that we did the show that PDAB had bought a whole storage unit out that was sold up in Blue Ridge. And in that were a few boxes of pictures. Well, he didn't want to sell this family's pictures, and he didn't know exactly what to do with them, so he brought them to me. And I could tell by looking at the addresses and stuff that the family was from Cartersville, Georgia, and did all the research and stuff, found the family in California. And the girl was flying in to see her great aunt, who was a little girl in these pictures, in Cartersville, and PDAP and I drove the pictures down there and gave it to you. I tell you all that to say that the man in the picture was a field doctor during World War I. And there's pictures of him in his uniform with his medical emblems on and stuff. And we hated so badly for those pictures to be lost from their family. And they were very appreciative. Apparently, when the grandpa died, they had divided the pictures, and one of the uncles had gotten sick, and his house had been emptied out and his stuff put in a storage unit, and nobody paid the rent. And so it eventually was sold. And that's how those pictures, precious pictures and letters, got lost.
His great-grandson looked just like him.
Looked just like him. We had a picture of the great-great-grandson looking at a picture of his great-great-grandpa. And when we popped open the trunk, that little boy grabbed in, he was about 7 or 8 years old, grabbed that picture and said, "Look, Mom, he looks just like me." And he did. It was pretty fun. It was a pretty fun day. A pretty fun day to be able to take those pictures back to that family. And with the connection there with the war.
Fort Hill Cemetery, if you have relatives and you don't know where, you know they're buried up there, but you don't know where they are, thanks to people like Brian Reed, you can go findagrave.com, and you once you learn how to maneuver in it, you could type in the name of your relative. It'll give you every chance to select Fort Hill Cemetery, Bradley County. You click on it, and just, if you have a common name, if you're Smith, you may have to look through 10 or 15 Smith. But if you have an unusual name, it'll come up and tell you exactly where they are.
Well, it'll tell you where they are on the map.
Well, that's where they are on the map. That's exactly where they are, but it don't mean you can find them.
Thank
easily.
goodness for that map. And still with the map, you might end up walking up and down a whole big section till you find them.
Right. And
But still, you're at least in the neighborhood when you get there.
that's sometimes the difficulty for us is we'll find a section we like to find someone for the tour, but that person will be in section 16 and plot number 233. And we sometimes don't understand or know, is that on the north side of the section or the south side of the section? So we end up having to cross-list it and find someone else to see what number they are to get close to.
It's not an easy task, but if you go up to the history branch, too, and you've got a name, Margot can help you look in the Fort Hill or show you where the Fort Hill book is, the wonderful paperback book that the ladies we were talking about, Minnie Sue Green and her mom, Anita, had put out. I think they're moms or sisters or something. They're related anyway. They will, there's a map in there and then an alphabetical listing of the graves that they had found as of like 2006 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that will help you at least get in the neighborhood. I know I've had several people call me and I'll look in my book and I'll tell them what, at least go to this street and look up the hill for them. Now, I've had people, I'm on the board for the old historical northern part of the cemetery, and I've had people go, "Oh, there's monuments on the ground." It doesn't take but a few tablespoons of water when it rains to get up under where the mortar gets broken after so many years of those big towers and things that sit up there. And those things will slide right off there when it's a little bit icy.
And sadly, it's sometimes vandalism, too.
And sometimes it's vandalism. But we have yet to be able to find someone that has the proper equipment that will show up and put those back up for us. The committee has really looked for someone, and we haven't been able to find anybody. So if anybody knows anybody that knows anything about monuments and about setting them up and gluing them back together, we need to talk to them.
Let me assure you, it takes more than just two men to lift those.
Oh, yeah.
A flat stone.
Yeah.
Oh, I jumped out of the car one day because Ron's grandma's one was turned over, and it's just one of those little, about 12 inches wide and about 18 inches tall. I could not pick it up off the ground. It was just face down, and she was just face down. Yeah. But we would really like to find someone that can repair those tombstones and set them back up for us. And I'm sure there's somebody out there. And yes, we've talked to the monument people.
There is, of course, there's the Veteran Cemetery also down there, thanks to
Bullet and Paul.
Paul. Take care of that.
Bullet and Paul.
It's time for our mid-morning break here. As we always do, after the few commercials we play, we have played the song "Gone Home." We dedicate that to all the people in our community that's passed this week. And I don't have any that off the top
I don't
of my
have
head
any
today,
name right
but
today.
I'm sure there was several.
We'll be back with you in about just a few minutes after the commercial break and gone home.
You are listening to WOOP
I'll look
LP,
up and
Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Another SOS, and you're stressing, and that's the time to check in. Check into cash, check in. When you have a cash emergency, you check in. We understand the urgency. Check in to get your loans and more. You gotta check in with your check into cash store. Walk in, call in, click in, go all in. Check into cash in, check into cash. Your one-stop money shop. Check into cash.
Tired of carrying around cash in your pocket and tired of banks? Visit usmoneycard.com and get your prepaid debit card to use wherever MasterCard is accepted. It's a smart and safe alternative to carrying cash, and it's convenient. Even if you have a bill that requires a check, US Money Card has that too. Visit usmoneycard.com today and find out how to get your reloadable prepaid debit card. Log on, load up, and love your US Money Card. Visit usmoneycard.com for complete details.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
Every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
from 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239 or go see him
Every Saturday.
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
All of my friends that I loved yesterday have gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. The songbirds are singing, the bells seem to say you're gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. They joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of your gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. Life here is lonely since they've gone before. Gone. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home. The old weeping willow that stands by the door sadly sighs. They have gone home. Gone home. They have gone home. They've joined the heavenly fold. They're walking the streets of your gold. They left one by one as the work here was done. Gone home. They have gone home. Gone. They have gone home.
Welcome back to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9. You can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. We got Brian Reed here talking about the Fort Hill Cemetery Walking Tour coming up on October 29th, 4 to 7 p.m., $5 per person. Don't want to miss it. Hey, we got a call coming in here. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron, Deb. How's it going?
Great.
Hey,
How are
Bullet,
you?
what's going on?
I know you guys are getting ready for the cemetery tour. It's been going on, I think, quite a few years now, and then I may join it myself this year.
Hey, you need to come up and walk around and listen to what they have to say. You know, it kind of makes you have more of a sentimental. Of course, I know you feel like you know those soldiers that are buried there, but it's an interesting little thing if you like history.
Well, all I already know about is the veteran section. I don't know any other part of her, so really it'd be new to me too. I've been going there 19 years, and I don't know everything about that.
No, no, you can never know it all.
No, but I may try that. I think it's from 4 to 7, right?
That's right.
On the 29th.
Okay, I may come up there myself and go through it.
Well, there you
I
go.
hope you do.
Tell Paul he can't ride his bicycle on that hill.
We'll see.
Bye-bye.
I can just see Paul coming off the top of that hill on that bicycle.
We mentioned there just a minute ago that I lost it here now. Where'd it go? Here it is. That a friend of ours has a birthday.
And who might that be?
Well, I forgot her name now.
Faye Calloway. Faye
Friend of
Calloway.
ours, Faye Calloway. And I found a little song I might play for her here. Just
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just gonna play a little of it here.
Okay.
A little Conway Twitty.
Oh, there you go. Birthday darling.
Here you go, Faye.
Hello, darling.
Hello, darling.
Happy birthday. I've decided not to give you a present this year. In fact,
That won't work with my
I
wife.
think it's about time I put some things away. I'd like to take away the suspicion that
I'm nothing like a Conway song in the morning.
world at times. By giving you some faith to hold on to, honey, whenever your hand is not in mine. Happy birthday, darling. I've no present.
All right, there you go, Faye Calloway.
Yeah, Faye was our first president of the Charleston Historical Society.
Man, got that thing off the ground and has it flown.
Yeah.
It's done such a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was appropriate for Faye. Here we got a call here. Good morning, you live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yeah, Ron, this is Sam McReynolds.
Hey, Sam, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thanks. I remember J.N. Aiken.
Oh, amazing.
For some reason, he was a friend of my dad's, and he used to come in the bank many, many years ago. And if I'm not mistaken, he was an executive of the Baltimore Sun.
That's right. That's right.
And his sister lived about catty-cornered from the Hancock House on Central Avenue there by the church, by Broad Street.
And what was her name? Do you remember?
Miss Ruth.
Miss
Ruth
Aiken.
Aikens. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the teacher.
And
Yeah,
I think she taught piano
there you go.
here. And Mr. Aiken was a very distinguished person. I can remember that. And what his relationship to my dad was, I have no idea, but they were friends. And he'd come by the bank to visit when he was in town. So thought I'd just pass that on.
Thank you. That's the kind of information we love. Thank you so much. Hope to see you at the tour. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Sam.
That's the kind of stuff we love.
I remembered him being a publisher, but didn't remember the newspaper.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah, he's big.
Boston, that's big.
Yeah.
Okay, Fort Hill. I have people often say, where's the fort and why is it, we know why it's a hill, but why is it called Fort Hill?
Well, during the Civil War in 1864, at the very end of the war, there were two such forts that were built in that vicinity. I realized that it wasn't a cemetery at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just vacant land. It was a farmland.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a Fort McPherson
Mm-hmm.
and a Fort Sedgwick that were constructed. And they weren't forts with walls. They were just simply a redoubt, a entrenchment of cannons that were placed there with being military positions. They called them forts.
Down on the southern end, they would have access to see main roads, the springs, and the railroad, so
Yeah.
they could see who was going down into the
That's the
Blue
whole purpose. It was to
Blue
protect
Springs
the
Valley.
railroad. They wanted
And then on the north, they could see what was going on in downtown Cleveland. I know there's a lot of damage reports where the soldiers stayed there for quite a while, and they'd go out and they would take down the rail fencing to build them cabins that or little shelters out of, and
there was an attack on Cleveland in 1864 where being on that hill was very significant. They protected the town of Cleveland in that raid that took place.
I don't think it was an official cemetery then, but there were people buried there in,
Yes.
in the 1830s.
Yes,
and
but
40s.
it wasn't called, of course, Fort Hill.
It's
It was
called
the
City
City
Cemetery.
Yes.
Hey, you're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, how you doing today?
Great.
Hey, what is one of the oldest graves in Fort Hill?
Well, they say the first one was Laban Parks. He was a young boy that was riding on a wagon full of lumber or something and fell off and was run over. His grave was marked about 100 years later by some of the ladies here. Of course, you know how that is, that the families would remember where somebody was buried, and then he just didn't have a marker. Also, the first
death, 1838.
right, and the first appointed sheriff of Bradley County, William Carter, is also buried in that very same section. And he was 1838 or 36, something like that. He had been appointed, and 4 months later he was dead. We don't know what happened to him.
So there was people buried up there before the Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think they called it City Cemetery. If you kind of think about it, there wasn't any place within the city limits that they buried people. And the only people that are buried inside the old city limits now is probably Nina Craig Miles and her family in the mausoleum that we know of. And they started burying people just north of 20th Street. We are 99% sure that there were Native American burials there dating back to who knows when. And then when the pioneers came in, they started putting their ancestors there. I mean, their dead people there. About 100 years ago, there was some attempt when they got ready to build Bradley High School that opened in 1916. In the middle of the night, they dug up a whole bunch of people and carried them up to Fort Hill and put them in a mass grave.
Yes.
And that was not nice, was it?
No.
And they didn't move the people that they knew that had had the yellow fever recently because they didn't really understand about those germs and things. And it was probably a wise thing that they didn't. And anyway, there was still, when they built houses and things there between the high school and 20th Street, the streets every now and then would cave down into a grave and stuff. So it was not done quite right.
Yeah.
That's the history you don't read about.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Hey, you can call us here at 614-5553. We're talking about, got Brian Reed here talking about the walking tour at the Fort Hill Cemetery. It's the 11th annual one. There will be talking 9 graves. People will be in period dress talking about the people there at the grave. They'll pretend to be that person,
Right, that's
basically. And it's a great way to learn about the history of our community, and they're concentrating on people around the World War I era. It was very interesting. Sam McReynolds calling in, knowing one of the people. We
really feel like there's a lot of people going to know some of these, or that was their great-grandpa, and, we have a Morlock and Akins. Who else was on that list, Brian?
Or me.
The Mees that ran the Coca-Cola bottling company were on there. That's really interesting, too. Mm-hmm. Their old house is still standing.
What's the lady that you're doing?
Martha Briscoe Lee.
Mm-hmm. What's her story? Do you know?
I just know that we found her. We discovered her through an image of her standing with World War I troops that were passing through Cleveland at the train depot. They're all standing
they would kind of get off the train and get
Right.
refreshments and stuff like that. I know that Mrs. Johnston that lived up on the hill by the Roth House, she was really instrumental at that time of getting socks knitted for the soldiers and getting bandages made and doing those kinds of things. I mean, on a massive scale. And she was quite up in her years at that time, but she organized a whole lot of that.
And the train depot was the main transportation mode in the world. In
Right.
the world, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were, of course, passing through to go to a major coastal city en route to leave the
Right.
United States. But in the picture, she's dressed in a Red Cross uniform. And so I traced her name and found, luckily, that she is buried at Fort Hill Cemetery. So we wanted to purposely make certain that she was part of the story.
Do you know who she was married to? Or
Oh, yes, I just don't have it pulled up here.
It's
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah,
it's one of the Lees, LEA.
Yeah. Her husband was George Johnson Lee. But he died in 1928, just shortly after the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then she had a child named Lillian Lee Bradley. Braddy, yes.
Mm-hmm. But it's such a lovely picture of her in her little, that little uniform that everything's covered but her face, kind of picture. And I'm sure that will be, I know that's the picture you've been using to promote on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
You can follow the Bradley County Historical and Genealogical Society on Facebook. What's that name, Brian, of that?
Yeah, you just go to Facebook and type in at the top, type in Bradley County Historical and Genealogical Society.
Tennessee.
yeah, Bradley County, Tennessee.
Because there's a Bradley County, Arkansas.
Yes.
And Polk County, everything. There's all kinds of
But
Polk
you
counties.
can, if you again have an account with Facebook, you can request to join the society page.
Mm-hmm. Next week, we're going to have a little bit different story show. We're going to have Barry Savage on. And Barry works for TVA and does all kinds of map work and surveying work and stuff. And he likes to talk about how the Georgia line was moved and where it should be and where it is now and those kinds of things. So you can get your questions ready for that. And it's not beyond me to ask a perfect stranger for help. I was needing the counties of Hamilton, Marion, Meigs, Bradley, Polk, and Monroe superimposed over the top of an old 1800s map. And he says, what scale is that map to? And I said, it's from the early 1800s. I don't think it's to any scale. And so they kind of were able to do that for me to give me a visual image when I'm talking about what the Ocoee district is today.
And then on the 28th, we're going to do a tribute to Corky Whitlock, well-known radio announcer here. Moved here in 1961. His first year broadcasting Bradley football. They won the state championship. The boys and girls basketball teams won the state championship. So he thought he was in sports heaven when he come here and had one team win 3 state championships that
One
year.
school, yeah.
Yes, so
I think we'll have to get Karen Mills to call in that day.
the other thing is, everybody knows him for that, but Little League Baseball started under his tutelage. He got in there, was actively involved, was still coaching when I was playing ball. So he was, done a lot of things for the community. And just one of those nice people. Just one of the really nice people. Well, we got Earl Rowan and Gary Ormby and trying to get maybe Bob Galt to come in, who worked with him day to day.
Well, I can just stay home that day because I won't get a word in edgewise.
Well, with Earl here, we'll have to put a muzzle on him, but
I think that's really nice. Ron thought that would be a nice thing so Corky could hear.
I saw Corky last night. Of course, Corky's health went down quite a bit. He was honored at the Bradley football game last night for starting the WBAC football picking panel. It's been going for 56 years, and of course, Corky was the main drive behind that. And the state of Tennessee gave him a proclamation, and some of the original members. So,
but that'll be fun. And November's a whole different world. We've asked some folks, and they haven't confirmed yet. But that's our next 2 shows. We're going to have a very knowledgeable guy about surveying and maps and the Georgia-Tennessee line on next week, and then Corky the next week.
Well, if your family has a older member in his 80s and 90s who loves to tell stories about growing up in Bradley County, we love those type of shows because we love just the good old guy come in and talk about before there was cell phones, before the toilets were indoor, that you had to grow your own food if you was going to eat, walk to school. We love to hear those stories. So if you've got someone in your family you think would be great, give us a call. We'd like to book those people.
Walk to school uphill both ways.
I did that. I rode a bicycle, though. I was a little bit more.
I rode a school bus for an incredibly long time. But that was tough enough in those days. I thought, I don't know, being on this bus is pretty hard.
I lived a half mile from Oak Grove Elementary, and I would ride a bicycle.
I don't know how you got up that first hill.
I was young then. I couldn't push my bike over it now, but we would ride there. But, there was no bike lanes or anything like that. And you wouldn't let a kid go that far anymore.
No, somebody run over them.
Oh, we lost you. Call again there. I'm sorry. I was looking the other way.
We just have a light that flashes, and if Ron's looking the wrong way, sometimes they hang up before we can get to them because they get that annoying message.
Yeah,
so call us back.
Call us back at 614-5553. Once again, I'd like to thank Mike Smith for sharing that he saw that light on that house last week. Because I didn't want to be the only guy that ever got fooled by that light, but I'm glad Mike Smith. And for Mike, listen, I don't know if he got to hear last week, it's a softball mansion in Charleston or Calhoun
that he was talking about. Yeah.
Go ahead, you're live.
Good morning.
Ron, Debbie.
Good morning.
This is Joe Stamper. I was out riding around this morning enjoying your program.
Thank you, Joe.
I don't contact you a lot, but I always enjoy it when I'm able to listen. And I heard you a request to call in if you had any relative in World War I, and I thought of my grandfather Moore, Luther Moore, was in the war. He was in the Army. He served in France, of all things, and it's my understanding that he was a cook. And I always, when I heard that, understood why he did a lot of the cooking around their household there in Ocoee, Tennessee. They were all from Polk County. And, I just, in all of my life, can't comprehend what it must have been like for those men and women that went overseas from anywhere, but especially from the foothills here in Appalachia, and probably hadn't been. He grew up in ball play, hadn't been 50 miles from home, and there they were, shipped across the ocean and put in a foreign land, and just what it must have been like for them. It would be overwhelming. But anyway, I wanted to call and honor L.W. Moore and just give you that little bit of my thoughts on what a horror it must have been for everybody.
Well, it is, and I remember even my dad that went into World War II. I mean, he'd been to Georgia and Tennessee his entire life, and all of a sudden he found himself in North Africa, driving across the Sahara Desert. And he used to talk about that quite a bit, too, and then the horrors of war, too. Yeah. It was a big experience for him. Well, thank you.
Her dad ran one of those spotlights when the planes came over.
Sure.
That's the first thing they shot at.
Yeah, guess what they shot at first, yeah. Oh, yeah. And so he and his buddy would turn the light on, and then they'd dive for the ditch because they knew that the fireworks was starting then. And quite an experience. That's why we need to remember freedom is not free.
Boy, you didn't. Well, I appreciate you all and all you do to preserve our heritage. And
were your ears burning last week? We were talking about that Stamper ghost.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there is so much to that more that I've learned I need to pass along to you guys.
You need to write down everything you know.
I do.
And pass it on to us. We'd love to have that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Before you go, Joe, could I ask a question?
Sure.
I noticed that there is a James Ralph Stamper that is at Fort Hill that I didn't know if he was a relative or not.
Ralph Stamper is a distant relative.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Two, I guess, in Bradley County, anyway, that I know of, two branches of with the Stamper name.
Yeah, I have a record here that he was buried. He was born in Ducktown.
Okay.
But he was an officer during the war, during World War One.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I can't. I wish I could give you the lineage on that. I can't.
Okay.
But I do know that they're the other branch of Stampers and my branch are they're related but fairly distantly.
Didn't the Stampers have a store up in Ducktown?
The store was in Ocoee.
Okay.
It's in
Auto.
Luther Moore that I just mentioned had a store on 411 Highway. He built the brick house that you probably have seen at the where 64 crosses 411. If you look to the right, to the south, on 411, there's a fairly nice brick house there, and he built that house. My grandmother, Father Moore, and then about 100 or 200 yards further south was where the Stamper store or house was, and store, and then he had a store 50 feet south of that. So we're kind of got merchants in our blood there. God, I forgot where we were going with it. Got to talking so fast, I can't absorb information anymore.
Well, we say we need to put our aluminum foil hats on here so we could pick up a stronger signal for our brains someday.
Yeah. But what you may be thinking in the Ducktown area, that's what we're.
Yeah. It just said Ducktown on here. You guys need to come up and visit with us the day of the cemetery tour. If you haven't been, it's a really fun time if you're a historian, and that's on the 29th.
Okay.
4 o'clock. Thanks, Joe.
See y'all.
Bye-bye. I appreciate Joe one day. He showed up here with a copy of a city directory for me to take home and keep. And what a gold mine it is for a historian to have a city directory. And Chip Bryant gave me one from the Rebel that's got the Rebel written on the edges of the pages. And I think I have 3 now. Old city directories.
The great references. I know when I done the documentary about Where Did You Eat, I went through there and counted the number of restaurants, which was like 60 or 70.
Little mom and pop places back in the
today,
50s.
Course.
Yeah. But anyway, stuff like that's not worth anything to anybody. Of course, it was worth something to them, but they wanted to share.
Hey, folks, you're listening to Old Town Cleveland on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. This show is being recorded, we hope.
Yeah.
It
works when it wants to.
But we will post on Facebook how do you get to see this on YouTube. You'll be able to see and hear this entire program if it worked.
I think it's really funny that some folks that are too busy on Saturday to listen can always seem to listen when they're at work.
Well, yeah. You're not busy when you're at work. Yeah, but it's a great... quite often I'll listen to the show again because a lot of time I'm pushing buttons and miss things, and it's a lot of fun. We got Brian Reed here today, and he's talking about the Fort Hill Cemetery Fort Hill Walking Cemetery. You're going to walk at the cemetery.
Right.
I'll get the name right.
2 weeks.
2 weeks from now, October 29th. It starts at 4 o'clock, ends at 7. You need to buy your tickets by 6. $5. Best entertainment. You're going to talk about 9 different people from Bradley County had something to do with World War I in some way or another, because this is the 100th year of us getting involved in the war. Next year, you're going to do a second thing.
We'll do a second one.
It'll be the end of World War I. United States was in there.
So how did we
18 months in the war, I think.
How did we celebrate when World War I ended here in Cleveland?
That's the origins of our Armistice Day.
Yeah.
We have November 11th. That is still our annual holiday, but at that time it was referred to as Armistice Day. And
Okay, we pushed the button again. We've got a ding that the phone wasn't working. So I don't know. I know that during World War II, all the church bells and things rang throughout the town. Imagine what that sounded like. Let's get this call.
Hey, go ahead. You're live.
Yeah, this is T-Man.
Hey, T-Man, lost my voice. What's going on?
We're sitting in here at Edgy Park eating our biscuit.
There you go.
That's a good thing.
I just wanted to remind you the fish truck next Saturday.
All right. Next Saturday, the 28th. Nope, the 21st.
21st.
I sit here and talk about things happening 2 weeks from now, and then I get lost and confused where I'm at.
I know.
T, do you have to get different type of fishes?
I fall in graveyards, too.
Yeah, don't fall in the graveyard.
Hey,
you might fall in a hole, and they'll cover you up.
Hey, T, do you have to order different type of fish this time of year?
Yeah.
Hey, T, do you have to order different type of fish this time of year?
Do what?
Do you have to order different type of fish because of the cold weather?
Well, the crappie is the only thing that they have in cold weather.
Yeah, so you want those? Okay.
The rest, they have the rest of them, but they don't have crappie.
All right. All righty. Thanks, T.
Always, too.
Yeah, 478-2405 if you need to order some fish for your pond. T will be glad to take your order. They'll be down at the Southeastern Co-op about 11 o'clock next Saturday.
Yeah, or they can just walk in there and get...
Right. Y'all got the bags and everything. All righty. Thank you.
Well, you have a nice day.
You too. Bye-bye. Brian, this has absolutely nothing to do with the cemetery, but we thought it was pretty funny. We always go out by Jackson Lake and out by the horse farm so our grandbabies can see the horses. And our granddaughter said, "Look at that big turtle." And I said, "Oh, that's a rock, honey. It's the biggest turtle I've ever seen in my life."
Hey, go ahead, caller. You're live.
This is me. Is that you?
It's us.
That's us. I'm not sure it's me, but I'll check.
I thought I'd put my 2 cents in.
Well, go right ahead.
I've enjoyed this morning when you said that Mr. Hardwick started a soul company in his backyard.
Yes.
Oh, that hit me. That's
long before you was born, but yes, he did. He had a tannery.
I wouldn't even thought about then. What?
Well, that's it. He kind of thought that he'd start a business for all of his kids so that they could take care of themselves, and that was one of the businesses.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I wanted to call in and let you know I hadn't forgot you.
Well, we always look forward to your call.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad Ron's better. And
he is doing better. He's not back to 100%, but he's doing better.
Well, that's good. That is really good.
He looked at me like he didn't know he wasn't 100%.
You know, I asked him after the surgery would I be able to dance, and they said sure. And I said, well, great, because I couldn't dance before. So it was a great surgery. I haven't been able to kick my heels up yet, but, you know, I can scoot around a little bit.
Oh, Lordy.
I can't do the twist either. That's another one that gets me.
What we do without this.
Oh, he's a mess. But he's doing much better.
I'm trying to behave today.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And all. And so, anyway, have a nice...
Thank you, Miss Joe. Bye-bye.
All right, I got a 50 check coming your way. Bye-bye. Button's hanging up here today. I got it.
There's some jelly on that button or something over there.
I need to bring some spray in here and spray that down.
Mm-hmm.
Not with Lysol. Now we got the phones ringing. Hey, go ahead, caller. You're live.
This is Joy Harden.
Hey, Joy.
Hi. I wanted to tell you about my husband's uncle that was in World War.
Go ahead, Joy.
His name was John Jackson Harden. He was gassed in France, but he came back to America, and he married Emma Bell Rubel and adopted Jimmy Rubel and Opal Rubel, and then he had John Alfred and Sam Harden and Bonnie and Eileen.
Mm-hmm.
He lived, I don't know just when he died. I looked in my book, but I couldn't find out when he died. He was born in 1892, though.
Mm-hmm.
And, but he was my husband's uncle.
Now, was he from McMinn County?
No, they live just below Tennessee, down in Georgia.
Okay.
So I imagine, though, he's buried here because his kids all live here. And I don't know if he's buried at Fort Hill.
Okay. So did you say he was gassed?
Yes.
Oh, what effects did that have on him? I know that happened that was kind of like the first time.
He wasn't ever really well, but like I said, he married and had these children and took care of them, and he was a good man.
What type of work did he do?
I don't know. Jim, his adopted son, run an auto shop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we know he's.
Yeah.
I did not realize that you were connected to that family.
Yeah, that was he was my husband's daddy, brother.
Well, it's good to hear from you. Are you listening to us on the computer or the radio today?
Well, on the radio. My daughter will get you on the computer, but I just listen because I don't sit and look at you.
That's okay. You don't have to.
I'll take that personally.
I'm glad that your husband's doing well.
He's doing well, and we were glad to see you up at the Cowpea Festival.
Well, I was happy to see you.
Now, on the 22nd at the History Branch, I'm going to be there doing a little presentation. You'll have to come see me.
Well, I tried to, but if not, I'll see you at the DAR. I think you're going to be our speaker next month.
Yeah, I think so, too. November.
Well, you have your books with you there?
Well, I guess I'll probably be carrying them around with me quite a bit from here on out.
Well,
I decided that I should stick to the DVDs. They're a little easier to carry around.
I know what you mean. But anyhow, if I happen not to see you on Sunday, you know how.
You'll see me at the DAR. Okay. Thank you.
Well, you have a good day.
You too. Nice hearing from you.
I love your programs.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. She's such a source of great information. I know that we had the show about prisoners of war, I believe, and several of her husband's brothers were in World War II and were captive, and the letters that they sent home and all this stuff. She always has great information. She's also a member of the Tennessee Trail of Tears.
I like the calls about that. So we're talking about the Fort Hill Cemetery walking tour coming up on Sunday, October 29th, from 4 to 7. It's $5. You got to buy your ticket by 6 o'clock. It is a walking tour. You'll actually walk by 9 graves, and those people there'll be people there in character of those people that have been buried there, and they'll tell you stories about World War I and how it affected Bradley County. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Hello, Ron. It's Pat here.
Hey, Pat. How are you?
Hey, Pat. What's going on, buddy?
Not a whole lot. Listen, back about 10 years ago, I put a leather helmet liner in for Moore, who's from Polk County. It belonged to his, I think it was his uncle that was a veteran from the First War, and he brought his helmet back. And
very interesting.
Yeah, he's the Moore that had Moore Exterminating Company.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm sure he's probably related to you, Ron.
I don't know if we ever were able to hook together, but he sure looked like he was related to Ron. He's a big tall guy. Mm-hmm. I remember Mr. Moore. He was our exterminator for a number of years.
Yeah, he had some real interesting stories about his veteran relative there.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Well, thanks, Pat. It's always good to hear from you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Brian looked over here and found John Jackson Harden in Fort Hill, and he was born in 1892 and died in 1975. So, Joey, he's at Fort Hill.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is so much easier now that you can look stuff up online.
Isn't it amazing?
I used to make lists of things I thought that I wanted to look at, and then I'd go to the library and I'd look them up and mark them off as I found them. And so it's really nice that it's all online for us. And thanks to the people that put it on there.
Find a grave if you're looking for somebody at any cemetery in the United States. You can. I've done a search for Jerry Moore, who is a second cousin of mine. Have no idea where he is. It's in the world. And there are about 400 or 500 Jerry Moores that I've been through so far, and none of them have the right daddy. And They're just, I don't know his age.
Well, I've looked for people and not found them, but I knew the person that I was looking for was buried in a certain cemetery, and they weren't there. So what did I do? I just put a request in, and someone from that town,
Every
city,
now and then
they went
somebody will
and did
go
it
find
for
them
me.
for
They
you.
actually put the information.
I have no idea what town it is. They moved to Odom, Texas, which is Moore County, Texas, and that's where his father's buried, my great uncle.
So Jerry may still be alive.
Jerry may be alive, but I can't find any reference to him whatsoever.
The person I was looking for was buried in Massachusetts, but he was from this area. So.
Got another call here. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Yeah, this Bob Cassidy.
Hey, your answer is beer.
Oh, you know, I do it in the morning. Well, look here, what I wanted to tell you all and Debbie and everybody, today is my happy birthday, and I will be accepting gifts all day today. Now, how about that?
Well, what kind of beer do you want?
Well, I don't know. Just though it's cold and a lot of it. I was getting ready. I'm going to go out to VFW in a little bit and help them get rid of some out there, you see. We don't want it to go to waste, you see.
That's right. Now, how old will you be, Bob?
76 years old. The Lord has been good to me.
You don't look a day over 90.
Well, thank you, bud. I feel like the girls. I still chase them, but it seems like they run faster than they used to.
Or you just have to stop and catch your breath every 5 steps.
Well, you're right. I guess you're right about that. Well, look here, I'll let you run, and I'll be listening to you. Very interested here today. And I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good day.
Hey, Cuz, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Bob.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, Debbie, one last thing. Today in the mail, I got my membership for the Trail of Tears.
Well, good for you, and I appreciate you joining.
Got it nice. Well, you're welcome. I'm glad I did it. Got a nice pen. But anyway,
you do.
I'll talk to y'all later.
All righty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Bob. One of my distant cousins there. I try to keep my distance from him.
We love the fact Ron does his question of the day, and I don't care what the question is, Bob's answer always has something to do with cold beer. Always.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I asked the question yesterday, if you were blindfolded, could you tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi, Coors and Budweiser, or tap water or bottled water? One guy answered, says, I can tell the difference between Pepsi and Coors and beer and Coke.
And Coke.
So some people, they claim they could tell the difference in the taste of all of them.
No.
I can't do it. Water's water.
Water's water.
Yeah.
Somebody said if the water's
And
cold,
especially-
it numbs your taste buds and you couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah.
I don't drink hot water, though.
You know, last week we didn't know a lot about the fire at the courthouse, but apparently there was quite a smoke fire with electrical system there, and they were quite a mess. And I know that if you're looking to get your tags renewed, you need to come down here to the Village Town Center, and in front of where the Chamber of Commerce is in the old bank building, Donna Simpson's office is there to get tags and titles and all that stuff. But I got so tickled when I came by here Friday afternoon. There was a mixture of cars and people standing at the drive-thru. I don't know if people just thought it was easier just to walk up to that window or didn't realize they could come inside, but I thought that was kind of funny to see cars and people in a drive-thru.
If you ever run into a problem like that again where that's not open, you can go to the next county over and they give you a sticker and register your tag.
And our son-in-law went online and then got his sticker in the mail. You can do that
about
too.
a week and a half later.
Yeah, well, that's okay as long as you've got your receipt.
Right. So, yeah, when the courthouse is on fire and you realize you didn't renew your tags.
Yeah, there's a problem.
My understanding, it was in the HAV, the air conditioning electrical panels caught on fire.
Just picked it up and carried it through the
And there's
house.
some question what it was the fire alarm.
There was a fire alarm ringing, but there was nobody there to hear
Well,
it.
it didn't ring 911, I think.
Yeah,
It was luckily, there was a lawyer working downtown, seen smoke coming out of the courthouse and called, and so. But I think that they said it could have smoldered all night long before it actually played. But it's going to be a while before the courthouse is opened back up.
What a mess. Yeah.
Just call whatever office you want to. They'll tell you the exact location. It's not an excuse not to pay your taxes.
No.
They have a building. They have more parking. They have better facilities than they do at the courthouse. Don't want you to come pay your taxes.
I don't remember where all the different offices are located. Somebody's up at the Andrew Jackson Bank and
Mike Smith's office.
The old Tennessee Bank.
Yeah. So, and if you want to know, you can just call the city mayor or the county mayor's office, either one, and they can tell you.
Or just call that direct office and they can.
I happened to be down here at the chamber office Friday afternoon, and some young guy walked in, and she said, it's across the parking lot. Apparently people have been walking in all day. Let's get this call.
Go ahead, caller.
Hey, Ron, how you doing this morning?
Great.
Hey, I heard yesterday or so on the radio or the news that it might be at 301 Key Street to get your plates, your tab.
Yeah, I think that's 301 Key Street is the old bank building down here at the Village Town Center.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was listening to you. Go ahead. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. But it's funny, that guy just walked in, and he didn't really even say anything. She said, I think what you're looking for is across the parking lot here. Anyway, they've just worked so hard. I hate that they've had such a time with the offices being so messed up and them having to work and stuff to do things that are unnecessary. Who else have we talked about? All of our people that are going to be on the tour?
Yes,
what do we know about the Morlock? Did we decide?
I don't know.
Which Hardwick are we talking about?
His name is Cicero Hardwick.
Cicero.
And he was a son of George of.
Okay, George. Okay.
Yeah. And there were two brothers, in fact, that were in the war, although the second one, who slips my mind at the moment, he was only in there just for a couple of weeks. But Cicero was his brother.
And Cicero is not CL?
No.
Okay.
No. It was, Cicero McCutcheons Hardwick.
Yes.
And Frank Tucker Hardwick.
Frank lived, I think, over on the east side of town in that house that we always come in.
He was only in the war for just a couple of weeks.
I think maybe
he was serving as a machinist, sort of making parts. But he was George Hardwick's son, and later became the owner of Hardwick Wood Mill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Cicero was an officer, and again, we don't know a lot about him. At least I don't yet. But the students are researching both these brothers.
You know, and it's got to be a little bit easier when we get into this time frame that there are more records on them and stuff.
Right, that's true.
Because
that's true.
When you start doing the older things are, the less you can find on them.
There are more obituaries and there are more public records. Yes.
You know, Fort Hill Cemetery has just got so much history of our community. You could go up there on your own and walk through and look at names, go back and look them up on Find a Grave or do a search for them. For example, people listening last week knew this, but Homer Simpson is buried in our graveyard here. Now, Homer Simpson sort of brings a chuckle to most people today, but the real Homer Simpson was the chief of police of Cleveland. Then he was chief of police for a while. Then he became a deputy in Etowah under one of the bigs. Come back, was chief of police again. Politics. And no longer was he the chief, and he went to Georgia, and he got put in an electric chair. Interesting story. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Electric chair.
Yes.
Plug her up. What's going on?
This is RD.
Hey, RD, what's going on?
My wife said she's going to buy me an electric chair.
Sit down here, dear. Relax.
Says nothing. I apologize. You know, I didn't move here till '88. I didn't know it existed. So. But I'd have been here sooner. But I have two relatives that fought in World War I. Since y'all on this subject, I got a big stack of the most jumbled up paperwork you ever seen in family history. And we got one relative named was J.P. Donegan. He's buried in the Meuse-Argonne Cemetery in France. to this day. You can look him up in the registry there. And I've got another one who, our family's from Dixon County, west Nashville. Got another one in there that this fella must have been a scrapper in his day. And apparently he left in 1914, I'm going by memory here, but 14 or 15, joined the French Foreign Legion and fought in every battle, most of the big battles through France with the French Army. Wounded several times, won all kinds of awards from France, and then when America got involved in 17, 18, whatever,
17.
he transitioned over to joined the American Army, fought with them, and then, according to the paperwork here, he took a bullet to the skull. When he was shipped back to the States, they sent him to an institution in Arkansas, from which he escaped and made his way back to Dixon County, married his cousin, and disappeared from sight. No one ever saw him again.
Married his cousin.
So there's a fellow that led a life.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, a hole in the head's pretty hard to survive.
I hope you get well. I guess you got a thick head, like most of us. So, but I got another an uncle. Well, he's passed now, of course, like all these people. But George Chappell, he was from Kodak, Tennessee. He was with the 106th Infantry and was captured during the Battle of Bulge, and spent the remainder of the war almost to the end in the German POW camp. He escaped from that and was picked up by the Russians as they advanced on the Eastern Front. And he wasn't released and repatriated to the States until November of 45, so, but he can't remember when I was young, he let me he kept a small diary on scrap pieces of paper of his POW time, and I got to read that. I've been trying to get it, but apparently I think one of his daughters has it, and we kind of lost touch with all those folks, so, but, a lot of, good family history. I've enjoyed the show. I like World War I period's one of my favorite things in history to study. It's a fascinating time. America grew up.
You need to try to come into town and do the cemetery tour with us.
I'm working up toward Nashville for a few weeks now.
Okay.
Driving back and forth. I'll stay on the road. I might as well be a truck driver working for the phone company.
Okay. Thanks, R.D. We want you to come do the show with us sometime.
I figured it out one time here a couple of years ago. I have driven in my career almost 40 years of doing this. I bet you between 2 and 3 million miles. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just I've driven all over the country doing this. So, but well, y'all take care. Enjoy.
Good talking to you. Bye-bye.
Y'all take care.
Thank you, R.D.
Well, I'm the coach up at McMinn County. I always wants to talk about the guy that fell out of the plane. Was that World War II?
I think so. Same time as...
he might be somebody that we look at in the tour. I think he's in Fort Hill now. He, are you familiar with that story?
No, I was going to say that we're hoping to, do Simpson next year.
Yes.
Part of the,
I think Simpson would be really good, but this other guy, he was big, and in the part of the plane that he was in was small, so he didn't have on a parachute, and the plane was shot, and he just
fell out.
He fell out, and many years later, his family was able to get his body transferred back to Tennessee.
I can remember the name.
I've got all that written down at home, but I can't remember my name right now.
Homer Simpson, real quick. His funeral was the largest funeral in the state of Tennessee until Elvis died. But still the largest one ever in Breathitt County. I think he had 13 preachers at his funeral. He was his father, of course.
That was a long one too.
His father was one of the founders of the Church of God.
Right.
So very prominent family in this community. He's married at there, so it's pretty interesting.
He's pretty close to Bud Cash, a sheriff too, up there.
And there's a book out called The Real Homer Simpson. I don't know if it's available right now. I think it's out of print. It's the most interesting story. It's got to be made into a movie. It's very sad. There's comedy in it. There's and Homer Simpson was in love with.
I'm so glad that they that Dennis Stewart told that story.
It's great. They used it at the Legends Lores, and
I wish Dwight had called in today to tell us how that went last night. I hope it went very well. This is the first year they've attempted to have it all indoor, and I think it was going to. I think that was probably a good move on their part. And I'd like to hear the rest of those Stampers ghost stories Joe was talking about. Isn't that fun?
Brian, real quick, do you have the 9 people
I do.
Okay, let's tell everybody again who the 9 people we're going to be talking about at the tour.
We have the Aiken family, Johnny and Aiken. We have Clarence Richmond, I believe his wife. We have Columbus Mee and his wife. We have Lance McKenzie. We have Jefferson Morlock. We have Cicero Hardwick. And finally, we have the Barnes family. And his first name is
James Franklin.
James Franklin Barnes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And all these people, there'll be a character
or two
in period dress that will tell the story about that person. They'll pretend to be that person.
Again,
So
some will get in uniform. Again, we'll have someone from the Navy, someone from the Marines. We have some from the Army, and then we have a Red Cross nurse. Yeah, we have several participants in the war. Yeah.
$5. That's all it is. It's a
It's a donation to the.
Yes, it is a walking tour. Mm-hmm. So if you have some limited abilities,
you might rethink it.
This may be tough. There is a road along mostly where we're going. The roads are not in great condition, but someone who is pushing you could probably help you through there.
It
will
really
be
hard.
rough. Mm-hmm. It will be rough.
And if you happen to be a little hard of hearing, do not hesitate to just walk up to the front of the group.
Stand as close as you can.
Stand as close as you can. That's okay.
Yeah. And
I've seen people stand over to the side so everybody else can still stand, but they have to stand close because there's railroad traffic down in the valley and roads, and it's a little noisy sometimes.
And plan for weather that could be 80 degrees or 30 degrees. I've been there, and it started at 80 degrees, and it seemed like when the wind comes, so just carry you
and we're so glad that I know that it takes a lot of encouragement from instructors and historians like you to get this all together. But, you know, when the kids go in and these young adults go in and do the research and stuff themselves, it means something to them then. And sometimes when we've torn down way too many buildings, we can tell our story of our community through in the graveyard. Matter of fact, I personally filled out the application for historical places for the cemetery and never followed through on it. I need to follow through on that because that was some of the reasoning for having Fort Hill Cemetery as part of the National Historic Places is that it tells the story of Cleveland.
Real quickly, we talked about forts. Every time you hear that this was Fort Cass, Fort Hill, Cowboy picture sort of really that a fort was thinking with.
Now, Fort Marr was one of those. Yeah. It had 4 little buildings on the corners and the big wooden wall around it.
It's called banyans, and the rest of them are palisade. The walls
I have no idea.
Walls are the palisade.
But what you're talking about was basically a ditch with some kind of covering in case they got fired at.
Fort Cass was 4 miles wide, 12 miles long. It did not have a fence all the way around.
No, it didn't.
It had encampment with soldiers and.
Brian, how many cannons do you think was up on Fort Hill?
I would say a complement for that type of a regiment would be, 3 to 5 for each, for each position.
We woke Cleveland up one year during the sesquicentennial when Phil Newman took his cannon up there and fired it off on a Sunday afternoon.
Sure.
I tell you,
and it was loud.
It really is loud. Can you imagine if there was a big bombardment and I think when they was fighting at Chickamauga, they could hear it in Cleveland.
The people in Polk County said that they could hear the repercussions all the way, hear the noise, sounds all the way in Polk County.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, all day long.
Thinking like Chickamauga, there was hundreds and hundreds of
cannons. I mean, it was probably unbelievable sound. Brian, as always, we thank you for your service as president of the Historical Society, and we thank you for coming in and chatting with us today.
And you quit talking. I never seen you talk that less. We always tell people. We tell people every week that it's up to you to save the history of our community. We can have events like Brian and them are planning, but those old scrapbooks, those old pictures at your house, when someone dies in your family, don't throw them away. Before people dies, get you some archival labels, archival ink. Go ask those people who's in that picture and have them write down on those labels and post it to the back of that picture. And when they die, share those pictures with people. The library, bring it down here to Whoop, and we'll be glad to make sure it gets to the right places. We've got boxes of pictures we still are going through.
Yes.
So,
I need to get finished with that.
We got one box of 5,000 slides. It ain't going to be Cleveland. It looks like it's going to be White County. So we're going to probably donate that to White County Historical Society. So do that. And Deb, you got to help today.
I can do it. You go ahead.
Do it. Can you do it?
I can do it.
We'll always remember Pearl Harbor.
But will we remember Aunt Pearl? See you guys here next week on Old Town Cleveland.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Just me.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
And you're listening to WOOPLP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original